What started as let's help people to win medals, break world records, achieve big headlines, has evolved to what do I think sport can really do for the world? We have to really shift from you have to do sport. I think some sports, because they have such rigid borders, are easy to opt out of. And a lot of sports are rushing so quickly to find younger and younger people to fit to their form of what a sport needs.
Tom Waller is the Senior Vice President of Innovation at Decathlon, the global sporting goods giant that's been at the forefront of making sports more affordable and accessible. With a career spanning decades in sports science and innovation, from working with Olympic athletes at Speedo to pioneering the science of feel at Lululemon, and now at Decathlon, he's driving innovation for how we experience the new era of sport, centred around movement, inclusivity and accessibility, and creating more opportunities for everyone to move and play in a whole new way.
My whole career, I've been searching for the best platform to deliver what I truly believe, which is that sport can really solve a lot of the problems in the world. And what attracted me to Decathlon is I think it is the most impressive and dedicated democratizer of sport.
I guess the prevailing thought is so many will say, but I'm not sporty, and so almost stops them from moving at all. But how do we get there if they don't think they can?
If we start at the right place, which is at the beginning with kids and allowing them to teach us, what sports could become. I mean, that for me would be a call to the whole industry. It's, yes, sport has become big business. Yes, sport has become a branded existence. But remembering that sport came from a place of just people exploring their own human ability, and the people that do that best are kids, because there are other ways to move, and then that just becomes an exciting innovation adventure.
When kids and parents see the Decathlon logo, the Lorbit, what do you want them to think?
This is the brand where play comes first. Why not? Why not have sport as a world where products are necessary, but those products facilitate betterment for humans that practice? A new era in sport is not about competition. It's not even about, pursuit of personal excellence. It's where vital movement is just the name of the game. So what can we do to sportify those movements? And then we change the definition of sport going forward.
Before we start, thank you for all the DMs and great feedback on Kuul conversations, which I love to hear, so keep it coming. And what would help us even more is if you choose to subscribe. It helps me to bring you more amazing guests and cool conversations. Now let's dive into the episode. Tom, welcome to Kuul Conversations. I'm so thrilled to have you here. Thank you for spending time to dive into your work in sports innovation and the way you're contributing to changing the world of sport. This is a real treat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I hope that we can do justice to what you come to understand in this space. And so I'm excited to talk to you about innovation in the sports ecosystem and how it relates to youth and kids activity, and how innovators like you are helping change the world and how people experience their lives. But before we get into that space, I'd just love to learn a little bit more about you and celebrate how you've come into this position in and around sports and health performance innovation. So where should we start?
I suppose without turning it into a long-winded story, I should probably go back many decades. So I started my career having been privileged to be part of a university in the UK called Loughborough University, which is consistently recognized now as the best place in the world to study any kind of sports discipline. I was originally a design engineering undergrad, and I finished that degree program and was thinking about what next. And it was the very last semester of the very last year that I happened to bump into an academic who was talking about human performance in a way that just really inspired me. I knew about the research group, which was a sports technology research group that was part of our engineering school, but it was all bats and balls and rackets and clubs and things like that, all very engineering. And I was like, I've always loved sports through the lens of performance. And I met this academic, his name was now Professor Mike Kane. And he opened my eyes to how technology can help people to achieve high levels of performance through the lens of the changing physiology and changing the mind and changing. And it just really lit me up. It was like, I wish I'd known this 5 years before. I would have changed all of my education to get there. And anyway, that put me into a PhD program where I was studying actually the respiratory physiology, training the way that we breathe to enhance our overall performance. And in that, we started to attract a lot of different brands also asking these questions of performance. So we spun out a consultancy company, and that consultancy company allowed us to bring all of these brands for really fast R&D projects. And so I got to work with everybody across the world, across all product categories, across all of sports. And I said, I think this is it. I think this is what I'm going to do. It was to get involved in sports companies, originally as a consultant, but then latterly as a leader within their originally R&D and innovation departments. And I suppose what started as let's help people to win medals, break world records, achieve big headlines, has evolved to what do I think sport can really do for the world, which is where I am now.
On that journey that you have been on, which has been winding in some ways, to answer that big question, do you find that there's a personal philosophy that's underpinning that as you seek to answer that question, or like a word or a phrase that cuts to the center of what you understand most as you're on that journey?
Yeah, right at the heart of what I have learned, what I am passionate about, and what I understand is this relationship between the human and the machine. And the machine can be anything. Our environment, the clothing that we wear, the products that we use, the deeply human relationship to everything we touch, see, hear, smell. That to me has become absolutely a fascination. And there was a time when we used to think, the brain is programmed and it allows you to do things. And what I've since learned is the brain is in a dark room and our senses are teaching the brain what's going on. And for me, then, that meant that the human machine relationship was that anything that we decided to create, any product, service, or experience, was also writing software in our minds that changed our perception of ourselves, of our ability, that then in turn could change how we could perform. And it doesn't matter if you're an elite athlete, you've never played sport before, you're the beginning of your sporting career as a young person, or right at the back end of your life, wanting to find that next sport that's the right for your body today. If you design it right, people have incredible experiences of themselves, trying to achieve the greatest things that they are able to do.
On that exact feeling and perception and the changing of that, what have you come to discover? What would you say has been the most surprising finding that you've applied to any aspect of sport?
Well, the surprising one was to know that the feelings that we have linked to the emotions that they generate are not in any way connected to the way that we create language in our minds. So it's no wonder people really struggle to articulate how they are feeling. But yeah, so the big aha was when people describe what they like, they use words that they don't necessarily mean. And I mean, so for example, the word lightness, you hear the word lightness in sport all the time. Make it lighter, make it lighter. And of course, if you're an engineer, you think that then that's a direct request to remove mass. But more too often, we forget to ask the most important question. So what does light feel like? And is it just a measure of mass? How much weight can I actually perceive if it's in my hand, if it's on my body? And so this question of what does light feel like is a deep dive into actually all of the senses. And often we use the word to describe a sensation, but they're completely separate. So in the famous original study, it was in golf, and it was about how do you make a golf club feel good. And there's an association normally with a feeling happening in the hands, but actually when you did a study of the language and then you associated that language with the senses that had been activated, it was actually the sound of the golf club that was the most important attribute of what made the golf club feel good. And we see that everywhere.
Are you looking to change those perceptions through the mechanics of the products and to influence the feelings that people have, even though the language that people may use may be different, variability across individuals, but also underlying the mechanics?
Yeah, this is super complicated, but more than my ability, so I have to rely on a lot of smart people. But I think that the important thing to focus on is it's when we use the term perception, one of the most important phrases associated with that is the meaning that we make. So what do we make that sensation mean? Is it a good meaning, a bad meaning? And where did that come from? So there's sensations that you've never had before, and they challenge your perceptions. Like, oh, I wasn't expecting that taste, touch, something. There's sensations you expect to have, because you've done something 1,000 times, and if it's wrong, it doesn't feel right. And we as humans, we sort of prefer the familiar, unless it gives us a radical breakthrough. And I remember, the first time we were putting athletes into full body swimsuits at Speedo, the idea of covering your whole body didn't feel fast in your mind. Then they got in the water and they swam fast. And of course, all perceptions changed. And then everyone started to swim faster and faster and faster. So, but yeah. I almost keep saying the word manipulation, but that's really the wrong word. It's really the wrong word. It's inviting people to realize that with new sensation, their perception can change.
How would we invite people to change in terms of their perception of, we'll say, let's take movement. If I perceive that to be uncomfortable or not enjoyable, how do we look at how we can move them through changing those perceptions?
Well, the interesting thing with movement is that I'm not sure very many people know what moving well feels like anyway. And so when we talk about discomfort, what we're often talking about is no one's really been taught to move that well. And I think if speaking to some of the best personal trainers, they will even say, if you don't move well, I am not going to give you a weight. If you don't move well, I'm not going to make it complex. And so I think one of the cool things is of being able to go back to movement and actually saying, if we change your sensory relationship with your own movement so that you just have that self-awareness of the range or agility that you have today should define what you try and do today. And I think, basic movement is massively limited by sensations that we don't often like. Some of those sensations need to be understood as fatigue, and I don't think everyone knows what that feels like. Some of those sensations need to be perceived as dangerous, potentially, an injury, at the end that limits the limit of a performance. And I think, some of those perceptions need to be understood as awkwardness. It's not a skill yet. So I think, awkwardness, discomfort injury are these sort of borders that are all something we can play with. I mean, and the training cycle, the cycle of adaptation that we can be inside as movers in this world is the more that we understand, I do a movement, my body learns, and then it adapts my capability, and then I do a movement again, and I've got skills acquisition and strength gain and muscle plasticity and neuroplasticity all shifting to help me get better. And if I do that within the right window, then I don't fall into injury. I mean, I think if the world was actually focused more on how to move really well, we would see massive gains in just basic human health, basic human comfort, how much adventure we would go on or not. So again, the more we learn, the more we understand, the more we can use this machine, up to the rev limiter, the best we possibly can.
If we go to the idea of the best we possibly can, that's going to look different for every person. So if we take something tangible, like the way our lifestyles today maybe don't enable us to move as easily as we would have before, how do you apply that at scale? And if we look to recreational play, sport, movement, how do we look at changing people's perceptions around that? And how do we look at maybe innovating more in that space? And you've talked about, we'll say, the application of technologies. So if we looked at perhaps maybe the intersection of science, technology, and sport, which we normally associate or is quite visible in the high performance world, how do you see that applying maybe to the rest of the population in recreational play and sport?
I think the first important thing is let's just not make it that this thing called sport determines a minimum threshold that not all of us can sometimes access. So if you don't feel that you can play football, that you are not welcome, or that you can go for a run, or that you are not welcome, then we've totally missed the right message. Lower the bar. All activity is good activity. All movement is good movement. So the question is then, how do you help people to feel the gains associated with a small amount of movement in a day? If we're going to really leverage what technology can now do, I think that the opportunity that we haven't yet invented into is to enhance the natural human intuition. Often when we think about digital technologies or adding sensors and really the pinnacle of what we see in some of the arenas of sport, we tend to see numerical feedback. It's as if we were walking around only looking at the dashboard of dials and numbers, but that's not how humans work. If something smells bad, we don't eat it. If something feels hot, we don't touch it. If we see a known threat like a tiger, we hide from it. So I think that what we really could do with technology to make it truly democratic is to use that technology to enhance our awareness of a good movement and a bad movement in a way that our minds and all of us as non-experts understand. We could encourage you to dial up some of your awareness. That can you perceive your breath? Can you hear your breath? Is it under your control? Could we show you in a simple terms, if we really want you to just try a little bit harder, could the world become a different color? But I think it starts with any movement is good movement. So what can we do to sportify those movements? Not gamify, but sportify. And I think to sportify is for it to be for every movement that feels vital to you should count. And if we then start to count them, when we can reward people and inspire people and connect people, and then I think all movement starts to be categorized as sport, and then we change the definition of sport going forward.
Sportify, not gamify. Could you maybe just give it a little bit more texture on what sportify means? So I'm just thinking, how might one understand for those of us in sport that know sport versus not? How do you think about that?
I suppose the basics of sport are, it's something that I do for pure joy, with others, to test where I am.
Right.
Sometimes I do that against other people. Sometimes I do that with other people. It almost inevitably includes some kind of application of effort or skill. So if you take sport out of that, so I'm going to do something that applies effort and skill, that is fun just for the sake of it. Sometimes I want to compare myself to others, to myself. Like, that is sportification in my mind. So it is as simple as being intentional with movement, doing it for the right reasons, and doing it for ultimately your intrinsic joy. And if by being with others, competing with others, being inspired by others, it moves you on, then include that too.
Okay. Okay. Something that's at the core there is the joy element. That sounds like that's really important in terms of how we perceive movement or how we interpret movement.
Yeah, joy is fundamental. I think it doesn't matter if you are, because we often associate joy with just the joyful act of play that we see in children, where it's more spontaneous. However, I haven't met an athlete who, at the highest level, at some capacity, joy is a core to their motivation. And it's the joy of winning, or the joy of participating, or the joy of testing themselves. It's still that sense of it really comes from within, and it really comes from about competency. It really comes from um, um, autonomy. It's mine, it's me, it's what I'm good at, and I'm expressing that, and that being then so critical from a joy perspective. But yeah, it's across the spectrum. Everyone, if you are not, we all sort of. I mean, for some of us, sport is our job, but for most people, sport is leisure. And so, if it doesn't deliver joy, it's failed.
And in essence, that's actually one of the core reasons we hear it in the kids' side of things. That's one of the reasons that they drop out, is because it's just not fun, or the joy isn't there. And how do you view, in terms of like kids' participation in sport? They participate for different reasons, but also the broader definition that we've talked about. How can we address maybe the bigger picture of kids not being active, and how we can look at it differently? What's the gap that we're not bridging?
Well, I think it's the the sportification of more acts of movement, so that everyone can call themselves a sports person, if they want to, but also destigmatizing the sort of the fixed narrative that so many sports have. I think some sports, because they have such rigid borders, are easy to opt out of. And a lot of sports are rushing so quickly to find younger and younger people to fit to their form of what a sport needs, that if you do not fit, then you are not welcome. And of course, then that puts a lot of people out of it. I also think, for kids, it's just a challenging time. You go through so many changes. You're learning your body, even and mind, in the most basic way, and then you're adding the complexity of a skills-based activity like a sport. It's a recipe for embarrassment and demotivation, and social your social existence, particularly as I don't know why I'm telling you this, you know this more than me. But I see, I've got two daughters, and I keep thinking of, the social complexity as well of being in a sport where or doing sport or choosing to do sport where that might have you stand out, or for the right reasons and the wrong reasons is challenging. And so I think we have to really shift from you have to do sport is not as important as you just have to consider using all of the attributes that you have. And if movement is available to you, you should move. And we should help you find the movement that you were designed for. Because I know I was not put in this world to be a sprinter. At the basic level of physiology, I am 100% slow twitch. so, I'm an endurance athlete and I embrace that. I will not try and tell anyone or compete with others that I am a sprinter. And I really wish, because I sincerely believe, and I kind of link it to the origins of the Olympics. I sincerely believe that everyone was born to move a certain way. Not everyone gets to discover that. And wouldn't it be great if everyone got to discover the movement that is theirs, and then they can decide what to do with that? So there are no rules because there are so many different ways to move.
There are so many different ways to move, and that's beautifully captured, because the I guess the prevailing thought is so many will say, but I'm not sporty, in how they define, and their belief behind that is, oh, I can't move, or I'm not this, and so almost stops them from moving at all. So it is that challenging piece around, wouldn't it be great for them to be able to discover that? But
Yeah.
how do we get there if they don't think they can?
Well, it starts with what we stop doing. We have a very narrow view of sport, and maybe the peak that we've defined of the pinnacle of sport. Maybe by better understanding women, kids, all different people, adaptive athletes, all different people that could participate in sport. Maybe it's a different peak. And so yeah, we have to stop having a narrow view of sport, and we have to stop just scaling down, products and sports and experiences that were created for a very narrow part of the population, or certainly not for everybody. And then asking the right question, which is, okay, let's understand these groups of people, how they move, the sports that they could do with the way that they move, the sports that don't exist yet, because there are other ways to move. And then that just becomes an exciting innovation adventure, because I think then we're talking about looking at the fundamentals of movement, creating sports that entice people. I think we'll see the invention of many, many new sports if we start at the right place, which is at the beginning with kids, and allowing them to teach us, what sports could become. I mean, look at the history of sports. Many of them were invented in schools by people playing within the rule, outside of the rules. Yeah, I keep mention. I don't know why recently, but remember, rugby was invented because someone decided to pick up the ball during a game of football, at school. And so yeah, let's just make sure we keep our eyes open to more of those moments.
A lot of our world is kind of externalized with technology and screens, and I guess that's one thing. And maybe as a parent, you see this, like parents struggling with screen time versus active time. And in many ways, that challenge piece, video games have got that done really well. And so it is no wonder that, if there's an alternative that is more fun and engaging, that it does make it challenging. And we do need to look how we can innovate around physical activity, movement, sport, and all of that to make it better. And how do you think the sports goods industry can do that?
Well, we have to step up, because you're right. That is the competition. If it's a competition for attention and time, then we're losing. But I think the competition side of it suggests that, well, then we have to be better, because we have to be a better choice. And my sense is that if the situation that we're in is 7 hours of screen time, we're talking about very steep hill to climb. And so my sense would be, to use that phrase, if you can't beat them, join them. What can we do to leverage this tool in a way that a kid will feel super engaged and feel autonomy, agency with that tool to then inspire the movement that we would like to see. But I think it's about really embracing the reality of what we're seeing with technology, not fighting it or over legislating it, and within reasons. I'm sure there's certain things, and I think some of the legislation around social media and just some of the research showing us that some things should just not be permissible, just like other substances, other things that we make illegal for certain age groups. I'm sure that will become real. But ultimately, if we make the choices more fun and we leverage the technology in their hand, I think that the barrier to progress will be much lower.
And do you see that the broadening area of technologies we can, look at, whether that's esports or we could look at very immersive VR type experiences? Do you think that's a direction that can also play a role as we talk about expanding out?
Yeah, I think spatial technology has a really important role. I particularly augmented and mixed reality, where we still encourage that contact with the real world. And I think that there's a progression of spatial technology that doesn't really exist yet. I feel like we're being driven by the technology more than the meaning.
Okay.
And at the moment, I suspect that there is a repositioning of the technology because we will better understand the meaning that we could create with people interacting with the world in a more active way. I think technology will facilitate that, and I say it with a smile because I'm quite confident that we can see it in the near future, and I would definitely be asking teams to investigate and create against that. So perhaps for our competitive advantage, I shouldn't divulge everything, but I think it's a really important question. I think that spatial technologies could be an incredible solution, but we need to not follow the technology. I think we need to make demands of the technology and put our effort into understanding the meaning that we could create for a child through their eyes, through their lens, through their experience, and how how they operate, how they work, how they think and feel, and are inspired or not, because they're not scaled down adults. They are very different to us. And yeah, and again, I keep saying these things to you, but I probably is your work I read.
No. It's so important because it's really in the context of when we think about products. That's completely your area in terms of products and services. Do you see an effect on the numbers because of the declining participation? Are we seeing that in the numbers, whether that's in sales and purchases or interest in the equipment and apparel? And then what do you think that we can do in that space to encourage more activity?
Well, the good news is because despite reduction in movement, the sports industry continues to grow, which is a strange and I suppose that's because sport continues and always has infiltrated culture so well. And so the products that we have, not many of them, certainly not all of them, do sport. So the good news is the right stuff is out there. We just need to get it moving. And so technology, perhaps if I was to, think about one area, I'd say, what technology can do is it can shed light on things that we cannot see or quickly understand. And so if it can create a new currency of movement that we can experience in a deeply human way, then I think that we will have breakthrough. But at least we know everyone has got plenty of sporty products to then, when they have that aha, that moment of inspiration, that discovery of a personal skill or attribute, all they have to do is go to their closet and they're up and away. It's already there.
Brilliant. And if if we get really mechanical right now about innovation and R&D, folks might say, well, how do you go about doing this? Because I understand that if you're innovating and you're trying to change and make a swimmer faster at the highest ends, I understand that. That makes sense to me. But how do you think about it, or how should they think about it? Innovation, but for us, like, I just need a t-shirt, or, maybe you could help just mechanically what your work is for people to help them understand.
Yeah. So a t-shirt is still doing a task. So we ask, what is the task that t-shirt is doing? How well is it doing that job? And so if a t-shirt is about self-expression, protection of modesty, management of heat and humidity with the environment, then we say, is it doing a good job? Could it do a better job? What would be the factors that would allow it to do a better job? If we were to look at then the hierarchy of the sensory experience of a person wearing that t-shirt, we would ask them to do lots of tasks, and we would find the limits of the functional bandwidth of that product. And then we'd say, okay, do we want this t-shirt to do more things in a person's life? Which I think is why actually a lot of people wear sporting apparel, because it's quite functional across many different domains. And if it looks right, then you can wear it to the office, to the gym, to school, it's pretty versatile. If we can increase its bandwidth, then we need to say, what other jobs will it do? If we can look at the main job that it does, we would say, how well does it do that job? What is the material limitations? What is the fit limitations? How does it help you move? Does it resist your movement? Does it support your movement? If I'm starting to move in this t-shirt, do I feel sticky because my body has got hot, or do I still feel cool? If I'm looking to move, but I don't want people to see the movement of my body, does it support my body so that I'm not then constraining myself to, that maybe it works carefully with any undergarments I might have. If I'm a woman, the bra that I have, do I want people to see my bra under my t-shirt? Then the t-shirt has to change the way that it manages light so that you can't see through the t-shirt. So I think we're looking constantly at all of the tiny barriers that would otherwise make you choose to stop or to not start. If we can eliminate all those barriers, then even the basic movement will be something that anyone will pursue. So we understand all of the human reasons why those barriers come about, and we understand all the product attributes that directly relate to those barriers. We haven't changed them all for all people. Not yet. That's a long journey, a mountain with maybe no top. But that's to innovate in our world, to innovate for movement, is to just understand and list all of the barriers, make sure the biggest barriers are at the top, the smallest barriers at the bottom, and then you work your way from top to bottom. And there's always a difference between the things that really make a difference and the things where you can change them. So, in swimming, for example, there's the wave drag, there's the shape of your body drag, and then there's the slipperiness of your skin drag. It's really hard to change waves. Very easy to change this. Waves have a big difference. This has a small difference. And so there's always a trade-off. So we do that every single product, every single person, every single sport, every single movement. And then we will gradually eliminate all those barriers.
You're in essence, you are a gatekeeper to entry into sports and movement in so many ways. You can facilitate that. You've been in the innovation space across, multiple sectors for such a long time. How do you balance the tension between the timescale for returns on this? So when we're looking maybe at more current business and then the future business, how do you balance that tension and the risk, perhaps?
I mean, setting the right objectives is super important. So, if we're not ultimately measuring our success in do more people move more, then we're not going to see the results that we want. So we have to measure that, and so the return on investment has to relate to are enough people moving enough now? Yes or no? The answer is no. If we're going to measure ourselves on more people moving more, okay, what are our tactics to achieve that? Through communication, through community projects, through affordability or access to sport, and ultimately then the utility, the fit, and the cost of products that are used for sport. The return on investment then is why I don't think that there has been enough investment in all of the different people that could participate in sport who have not been included in the research, included in the creative acts. That's a very important place to get a very positive return on investment. Because like I said, most of our research was done, not our research, most of research was done in the world on men, and then we scale down. Whilst that means that we can make some assumptions and move quickly, I don't think the people that are then wearing scaled down or using the scaled down product are having the best experience. And that must be putting a limit on the number of people who will participate. So as soon as we start to put all of the humans into our focus and we treat everyone as an individual and we understand a different kind of grouping, then we can start to say the cost benefit analysis of investing into the time it will take to understand a certain group that maybe could inspire how we would affect everyone. That then becomes where we prioritize. So the more people that we can impact by working with different groups of people in a more detailed way always becomes the best projects to invest into. And we see it over and over again. And learning from the few can always inspire the many. What we need to do less of is only learning from the many who are already there, already doing it, because it's a bit of an echo chamber. It doesn't, it makes being competitive really difficult. It makes it hard for us to stand out as a brand, because if we don't question what else and who else can we learn from in this space, then it's actually very expensive to compete with someone else. And then as soon as you've done something, they'll compete. And then season on season, it's just this constant iterative and incremental change. Whereas we know that if you can create a market, then ultimately the return will be much larger than if you just try and compete for a small share of an existing market. And finding that balance is a part of the game.
And what originally attracted you to Decathlon, to their mission and their brand, to do this type of work?
My whole career, I've been searching for the best platform to deliver what I truly believe, which is that sport can really solve a lot of the problems in the world. Not necessarily sport as we know it, but like I said, a redefinition, a rearticulation of sport. And what I've seen in the world is that sport is ready to be democratized. And what attracted me to Decathlon is I think it is the most impressive and dedicated democratizer of sport. So the beginning of Decathlon was about putting all sports under one roof so that people could see what sports are available. And then it challenged, why do products have to be so expensive? Is there not a way to simplify and make sport more accessible by making it more affordable? And they've been leading that for decades. And that was in a world where the era of sport was much more dominated by competition, by elites. But now, I think for the last probably decade, we're starting to see a new era emerge. And the new era in sport is not about competition. It's not even about, pursuit of personal excellence. It's where vital movement is just the name of the game. And so we all move because we should move. We all move because we believe that it's healthy. It's like brushing our teeth and eating a balanced diet. Movement is essential. And I think if you start to talk about a future where this era of sport becomes dominant, then we're talking about movement being vital, therefore needing to be democratized, therefore needing a brand that knows how to democratize. And that's Decathlon.
And in your next few years, leading innovation for Decathlon, what is the legacy, but also the change that you would like to see?
So I would like Decathlon to only do what Decathlon can only do. And that is then to take the lead as a democratizer of sport. And I think at a legacy level, also, we should start to challenge that, because sport is something that for most of us, we choose to do it. It shouldn't come at a cost to the environment and the planet and the resources that we are, dwindling. And so I would like to see in the next 10 years that every time you play sport, the world gets a little bit better. It gets a little healthier. We add a little bit of something back. Social cohesion goes up. Activity levels go up. Why not? Why not have sport as a world where products are necessary, but those products facilitate betterment for humans that practice and the playground that they practice in. And I think it was once a bit of a pipe dream, but I think that now the world has woken up to it being necessary. Sport has always been a feature, and I think we can resurrect that.
That's an exciting frontier.
Mm.
We've covered a lot here. We've talked about inclusion. We've talked about how expanding the future of sport and what that looks like. We've talked about some of the barriers and how technology applies to that. Is there anything that I haven't touched on or that you'd like to?
Maybe just to reiterate that I don't think sport belongs to anyone other than the people who choose to create it. Right. And I think it's important that we loosen our definition of sport. And I'm thinking in particular about kids. I think let's learn from kids about what sport can become. I mean, that for me would be a call to the whole industry. It's yes, sport has become big business. Yes, sport has become a branded existence. But remembering that sport came from a place of just people exploring their own human ability, and the people that do that best are kids. And I think that I would love to just put the future a little more in their hands, with us supporting its creation.
Incredible. I definitely say yes to that. It's absolutely. I think we underestimate how much kids can teach us and change the world. Quick rapid fire round. 5 little short questions, 1 or 2 words of an answer, whatever comes to mind. Sport is?
Joyful.
My favorite memory of play or sport is?
There's a lot. With my father.
When kids and parents see the Decathlon logo, the Lorbit, what do you want them to think, to feel, to perceive, to experience?
This is the brand where play comes first.
That's cool. If you could change one thing about the way we approach youth sports and movement and activity, what would it be?
Find the genius in everyone.
To create future fans of movement and play, the sports industry should pay attention to
a new currency of movement.
And finally, the future of youth sports is?
The future of sports.
Very cool. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time here today, and so many key messages around inclusion, covering innovation and where we can go, and ultimately how people can move more and make the world a better place and people's lives. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you.